So at this time, I'd like to kind of call upon Bipin. The full name is Bipin Pradeep Kumar. I just know him as Bipin. So Bipin actually just got a new title, right? So he's actually one of the 5 experts on IoT in the world, and none other than the United Nations have conferred this on him as the UN expert on IoT. So welcome, and thank you so much, Bipin, for coming here. Right, so he's going to kind of, unravel this smart city mystery of what's going on in India, especially with all these 100 smart cities that was unveiled by the government a couple of years ago, right? And we put together a very nice panel. We have Satyanarayan, who's the MD of Central Parking Systems. Satya, please come on stage. You'll hear a lot about what Satya is doing, and one of the most aggressive companies in the smart city space. You'll hear from him on how he's actually scaled up already. He's already a scaled up company. So you can ask all the tough questions how he did that. Siddhartha Monte, Director Technology Office from Intel. Siddhartha, please come on stage. And thank you for coming. Vaidyanathan, Founder and Managing Director, Personal Air Quality Systems. So Vaidya is put together a solution to kind of let us know whether we breathe the right quality of air in this country, and Bangalore in specific, okay. And has Yogesh Ranganath? Is Yogesh there? Yogesh has not come, okay. So who else? Is one more, right? Narayanan, yeah. So Narayan Subramaniam, who's the Chief Software Architect of Sun Mobility. And I'm sure most of you know what Sun Mobility does. One of the pioneers in electric vehicles. They're trying to put together a battery management systems which can be kind of, replaced, exchanged on the fly with connected cars, and driven none other than Maini, right? The one who brought us the little car, electric car to India. So with that, request Bipin to kind of come and share a few pointers on the topic, smart cities.
So before I start, what I wanted to do was I just ask just these speakers to introduce themselves and talk a little more about what it is that they do, so that you have your questions and thoughts framed. So this is right after lunch, so rather have it as a really engaging session rather than us just keep talking. So introduction start from Narayan.
I thought I would avoid that. All right. Thank you for having me for this panel discussion today, and thanks for the audience for staying back after lunch. So my name is Narayanan, and I work for a startup called Sun Mobility. Essentially, Sun Mobility is an energy systems company. Right now, the focus is on electric vehicles and electric mobility. We provide solutions for battery swapping technologies for 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, and electric buses. So if you go to our website, you'll be able to see actual demos of products that use our solution. And we work with a number of OEM partners in the electric vehicle space, while we deliver smart batteries, which are IoT enabled, as well as charge and swap stations. So this is, in a broad nutshell, what Sun Mobility does. And so I'm responsible for all the technical software related activities that happen on the charge stations, embedded systems, as well as our cloud solutions. So I'll hand it back to Bipin.
Thank you, Narayan. So any questions regarding what's happening on the electric vehicle scene, government's policies on electric vehicle standardization, what's happening in the global, what are global best practices? I think all of these are questions that we will have Narayan talk about. Satya?
Yeah, sure. Hi, thanks Bipin. Hi, my name is Satya. I'm not going to tell you the full name, then we get confused between both of us. So I'm the managing director and founder of a company called Central Parking Services, CPS in short. I'm sure you most of you would have experienced our services in airport or shopping mall across the country. We are a company which designs, puts the technology together, and operates parking lots across the country. We are in about 34 cities across the country. Of late, we have been fairly active in the smart city space. We've been advising the various cities on how they must look at parking, how they must look at mobility. We are also implementing smart parking for 5 cities across the country. One of them, of course, is Bangalore. So hopefully in the next 6 months, 8 months, you would get to experience IoT technology in parking in Bangalore. So that's a brief intro about me. Thank you.
So Satya, parking is probably, if not the only, probably among the few solutions that generate revenue for the municipality. So parking is hot, really hot. Siddharth?
Good afternoon. My name is Siddharth Mohanty. I manage the Intel India Technology Office. The core functions for this team is to look at where we need to invest in terms of technology, and also where we need to invest in terms of solutions for the local market. India being our home market for the unit here, we are focused on a lot of initiatives for India. And one of those initiatives that I lead is on smart cities. We are working with a lot of other partners and also with the government to try and see if we can create a common data exchange platform for smart cities. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. But essentially, this is a core area for us, and we've seen a lot of growth in India in smart cities. A lot more is going to happen. We are just at the tip of the iceberg. A lot more will happen, and this is the right time for us to come together and try and build solutions that we can scale across the different smart cities in India. And this thing hasn't happened in many places around the world, so India can be a good example for the rest of the world. Something that works in India can be deployed anywhere in the world because of the scale that we can provide here in the country.
Thank you, Siddhartha. In fact, something that Siddhartha said about not working anywhere else in the world also, it's quite true. What you're trying to do here in India is not something that has precedence or success pretty much anywhere in the world. Everybody's learning, and we are probably among the people that are learning along with the rest of the world. So moving on to Vaidya.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Bipin. My name is Vaidyanathan. Call me Vaidi, founder and CEO of Personal Air Quality Systems. Talking about air quality, we all know it impacts health, and the space has attracted interest from literally K-12 kids through to MNCs in terms of device, solutions, data, analytics, and the whole thing. We believe this is an interesting space that needs to be addressed with all the seriousness to work out meaningful solutions, and we believe that India can lead the world in innovative solutions. Our journey has been an interesting one. I'll be happy to share that as the chairperson guides us. Thank you.
Thank you, Vaidya. I'm supposed to give a small presentation now, Keynote. I have the mic. I don't know if you all want to sit in the dark, or should I put on more light there? Or for all you know, you all may sleep right after that good lunch that Ranki spoke of. More light, or should I just keep it as it is? Sorry? As it is? Or you all want to sleep? Makes my job easier. Most of you may not even have heard of it. We are about 3 years old, but we've been active in the IoT space to a large extent. And I've been involved in several initiatives. So I'm going to start with one of the initiatives that I've been involved in, what is called the IoT for Smart Cities Task Force, where what we did was analyze all the smart city proposals that came about that were accepted by the government. So 90 cities, what do the 90 cities want is what we analyzed, and we came across this fundamental breakup in saying that there are about 94 different use cases, and these span what could be IT, ICT, and non-ICT. And from what we analyzed, the output was that there are about 44 use cases that are ICT specific, about 50 of them without any ICT involvement. So for people who actually say that smart cities are all about ICT, not necessarily true. There is more to smart cities than just the IoT, ICT. So this is the first learning. The other thing that we did, the other thing that we did was figure out what are the budgets that are allocated to these different solutions, right? So when we tried to segment it, we could come to 5 different verticals, which is your transport, water, energy, waste, connectivity and command, and one is the other. So everything else that didn't fall into these categories, we could say falls into the other category. So I presented this a number of times. Maybe I'll just go through it fast. There is more to this. There is a detailed Excel that talks about which city, what's the solution each, what's the budget. So if you see this, you'll see that transport is actually the biggest chunk of what cities require. Transport and transport related, which includes parking, by the way, is almost 28%, right? Yeah, almost 28% is what cities require. This is the biggest pain area that cities have. Then comes energy, then comes water, you have waste, and connectivity and command center is pretty much in hand, and everything else is subsequently. So this is the broad breakup of the kind of solutions that cities require. We did even more. We analyzed the budgets that cities are willing to spend on each of these areas. These numbers are more or less accurate, but because of the way cities require solutions, these numbers could fall into different segments. As you can see, the biggest chunk is transport, 15,000 crore. That's the single largest problem that cities want to solve. And ITS, smart parking, all of that come under this segment. The other is, the next is energy, which includes smart energy meters, which includes distribution chains, SCADA systems for distribution. This is the next set. So altogether, this is the breakup. Roughly 54,000 crore in ICT-related solutions and another 51,000 crore in non-ICT-related solutions. Again, give or take a few, because solutions fall into different segments, but this is roughly the case. We try to classify this into the kind of, obviously, even though the number of ICT solutions are less, the budgets that are allocated to ICT solutions are far more. This number is important. Just keep this number in mind, which is roughly about 100,000 crore. 100,000 crore is probably about 60,000, 10 billion, 12 billion. That's roughly the number that we are looking at spending.
What is ICT? What is ICT stand?
Information and communication technology related. Oh, sorry. Perceptions, wrong perceptions. I thought everybody who comes to an IoT conference would know what ICT means. My mistake. So yes, that's the broad breakup. Any questions on this? So this is not. So we have identified 108 cities in India, 108, 109. But this is out of the 90 proposals that came first. So maybe another 18 cities, 19 cities have not been analyzed. Buildings, roads, parks, infrastructure that is not related to ICT per se. Sorry?
To construct buildings, roads, it's a huge expense. I mean, you
Yes.
cannot compare that with ICT.
Yes.
But it's only less than ICT.
Yes. This is the number. You can verify it. I'll send you the Excel.
I mean, basically, is that incremental cost something you have to?
So maybe, I think in many of these cases, maybe because they are PPPs, the government doesn't invest, perhaps therefore the budget doesn't come in, but highly unlikely.
Okay.
The structuring could probably waive off part of the solution cost perhaps, or the implementation, the project cost. So moving on, the fundamental to a smart city is, as you know, the city and the administration. This is, the very basic. But in India, how it has been structured, the implementation of a smart city is like this. The first is the SPV, and SPV is formed. That's the entity that is in charge of creating, in charge of managing, developing solutions, etc. That's the SPV. The SPV brings on a PMC, which is the program management consultant. The program management consultant and the SPV together decide the solutions, and they bring on an MSI, which is the master system integrator. The master system integrator then works with all the solution providers, service providers. So this is pretty much the chain. So as an end solution provider, I'm probably the last on this value chain. But it is how solutions are brought about by cities. In this, yes, as I was just mentioning, so these are the people who determine and design, and the implementation happens by these two parties. So this is your early tender. The first tender that goes out is to bring bring a PMC by the SPV, the special purpose vehicle. So people who don't know the jargons, SPV is a special purpose vehicle. PMC is your program management consultant. They build the RFPs are, well, you know what RFPs are, requirement for proposals. And then it is the implementation that happens. This is the value chain. The PMC and the SPV monitor the whole thing, the whole solution. The MSI comes in subsequently. Now this is important for you to know. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you who are providing solutions don't really care about this, but it's important for you to know who it is that you need to target eventually. I mean, if you're providing a solution, there is no other way other than working with an MSI. It is inevitable. So these are the partnerships in a smart city. And I'd like to highlight this because we will be talking about an open citizen engagement solution, which actually is, Bangalore is one of the pioneers. Arun is not here, others he would have been happy to talk about it. How can citizen groups actually work to a solution towards a smart city, contribute to a smart city solution? There are ways possible. It doesn't have to be that it's only through a solution provider that I can provide a solution. There are citizen engagement groups that you can work with. So ultimately, it's your citizen, your service provider, everything that I spoke about as a MSI, PMC, all come under your service provider. And then, of course, there is the government. So the different ways in which the government works between the government and citizens work, and government and service providers work, and of course, the service provider and the citizens can work. There are different models in which they can they all work together. The PPP is primarily the model that the government chooses to work with a solution provider. This is changing, of course, and there are different models of PPP itself. We'll come to some of that. So we as a startup, this is what I was saying, what we do. So we are the PMCs for 3 cities, Agra, Lucknow, and Aurangabad. We are working with another 2 more. We also provide a product. I mean, we are not a consulting company really, but we have been in the consulting space, I'm saying officially, because of, as a startup, it's difficult to get revenues by. So we have our expertise, we have leveraged the expertise. So we have both the partnership, we have both the consulting arm and the product development arm. My team members here work on the product. Consulting happens only in these 3 cities. So as a PMC, we design what the city needs to be in collaboration with the SPV. Agra is the city that we have. Agra is one of the first cities that came out with an RFP on what is that they require. And the reason I highlight this is because pretty much all of these solutions are about IoT. We have, as a first phase, we have 350,000 RFID tagged households, RFID tagged households wherein garbage that is being picked up will be monitored. Different ways in which you can do it. There are, I think, automatic number plate recognition systems. There are junctions with cameras, PTZ cameras. You have the traffic control, 62 junctions, as you can see there. You have safety and surveillance systems. Pretty much everything there on the left side is IoT enabled, which goes on to say, as most people here will acknowledge, that it's inevitable to have IoT in the smart city space. So that's the actual RFP from the Agra Smart City, which I put there. Summary, of course, but it gives you numbers. So you know what are the kind of numbers that the cities are looking at in the first phase. For a city like Agra, waste, pollution, all that is critical. This is Aurangabad. Hasn't gone to the RFP stage yet, but this is what was identified, saying that they need a city operations center. Again, traffic, your solid waste management, your attendance as well, your smart street lighting, citizen app. A lot of people want the citizen app. You have the CCTV again. CCTV by now is a constant along with the command and control center the city is required. You have your smart bus stops that Aurangabad wants, and of course you have digital signage, which cities are looking at. So that intelligent signage. These are all ways to monetize for the city too. Having said that, so you know, you understood how the whole Indian ecosystem works and the numbers in the India as well. You know, this 100,000 crore that I spoke about, you've seen that. I wanted to give you a comparison with China, not only for a comparison's sake, but just to see what it is that they're doing. I think it's important from an IoT space, the companies that we are, or the companies that we want to be, to understand how companies in China are, and to set the stage. This is from a book by a gentleman called Vaclav Smil. He talks about shapers of the new generation, new cities. New generation of the next century. And he talks about just these two things there. Can you see on the left and the right, the graph? It talks about the consumption of cement. Very simple statistic. Talks about the consumption of cement. Anybody just want to read out what it is? Thanks. Yeah, that's 4.5 gigatons of cement that the US used in 100 years. And on the right is what China used in 3 years this decade. It's 1.5 times what the US used in 100 years. Yeah, it's 1.5 times what they used in 100 years. But what this talks about, or what this talks about without actually even talking, is the extreme pace of urbanization and consumption that China has. I'm sure all of you know that. Now you have a statistic to go by. But you can't achieve this extreme pace of consumption and urbanization without automation. Just for this cement business, you need energy, you need logistics, you need transportation, you need manufacturing, you need security and surveillance. You need to automate this. Without automating these different disciplines, you cannot achieve this kind of scale. It's impossible, to achieve this kind of it's humongous. Now you understand where China is. Now you understand where China is going. And it's their work in the IoT space began way back in 2009, and at a really high level. Wen Jiabao, he was the premier of China. In 2009, he spoke about the need for breakthroughs in sensor networks and IoT at one of the anniversaries of the Chinese Academy of Sciences. That's when he spoke about it first. In 2010, he already had, in 2010, he had it in the government report saying IoT. Now, I've had different ways to address this, translate this from Chinese, get it from government standards bodies, etc. But the term IoT was used in a government report in China in 2010. In 2011, China has 5-year plans pretty much like India. In 2011, they had IoT as a requirement in their 12th 5-year plan. Sorry, in their 12th 5-year plan, they had IoT as a requirement, saying, I think the phrase is 12th 5-year development plan for national strategic emerging industry. Not just this, they actually said these are the 9, where is that? I think I jumped a slide, sorry. This slide is more important. So they have demonstration projects in 9 areas: industry, agriculture, logistics, healthcare, living, environment and energy, public safety, smart grid and ITS. And again, these are not small projects. When they talk about, what is that? They talk about smart grid. As a demonstration project, they had 200 million meters. 200 million meters, energy meters as a demonstration project. In the period between 2011 to 2015. When they talk about ITS, they had, I think, 60,000 tolls that are electronic ETCs, which means, like we have 10, maybe 20 lanes in the Bangalore highway that goes to the airport. 60,000 of those, they had it as ETCs, which means electronic toll collection. So the numbers are massive. In fact, in the pollution, in the healthcare, is what I was talking to Vaidya here. They were monitoring 15,000 parameters. Now, I have no idea what 15,000 parameters are, or whether it is an interpretation or a wrong interpretation. Maybe they have 15,000 centers, but the number 15,000 is there of either the centers or parameters. I hope it is centers for our sake, because we're just monitoring 13. He says, yeah, so Vaidya will clarify that. But it's massive. It's just the demonstration projects are massive. And brings me back to this. So this is the number that the Chinese government is investing in, and I had the opportunity to talk to the Chinese officials on October 15th, just to clarify whether this is indeed right or wrong. They didn't, but they never said it was wrong either. The Chinese officials were there. 600 billion, that's the amount the government is investing to period of 2020 in IoT, just in the IoT space. 300 billion, this is the amount that they're investing in the smart city space. Anybody want to hazard a guess how many smart cities they're trying to build? Of course, China's much bigger than us. Out of curiosity, come on, somebody raise your hand. Just give me a number. Sorry? Oh, bang on. Who said that? Ah, thank you. Yes, 500. That's the number of cities they're trying to build, or make smart rather. We are trying to do 108. Well, not bad. I mean, we are probably 1/3 the size of China. So 500 is, yes, that's, and with an investment of 300 billion. Now, what do you think is the impact they expect out of this? I mean, the number was there. I mean, I skipped through it. What's the impact they're trying to achieve through this? That's the number, 1.7 trillion. They believe that by this investment in IoT, in the IoT space, and very specifically it's IoT, they say IoT in their documentation, that they will have an impact of $1.7 trillion by 2030. $1.7 trillion at that time, 2030, China is supposed to be a $30 trillion economy, roughly about 4 or 5%. Yeah. At that time, in 2030, we are a $7 trillion economy. This number is roughly 30% of our economy, and they expect this to happen through IoT. It's there in the documentation. There are links there at the bottom which validate this data. And I also ran this data through the Chinese officials just 2 weeks ago. So this is the massive scale that China is investing in IoT and expect as well. And this, I mean, we are a startup, and we've been trying to raise money. And I tell my co-founders saying that none of the VCs in US or Europe will understand the scale of what IoT can achieve because they just haven't had the experience or the kind of access and kind of impact that they see that China has had. So if at all we're trying to raise money, I think we should raise money through the Chinese. You saw that. So this is the next phrase. What we are trying to do, back to India, changing track. So the government of India has said that for IoT in smart cities, like this is part of the National Digital Communications Policy this year, which was announced a couple of days back, a couple of weeks back actually, which very clearly says that smart cities, as part of standardization, will have something called a common service framework. So everybody spoke about, I'm sure a lot of people have spoken about, in fact over here we have different verticals, people representing different verticals. So for the verticals to talk to each other, smart cities won't be siloed anymore. But this is also intention, this is intention. Smart cities will have something called a common service layer, common service framework, where data or APIs can be exchanged. And I don't know how it'll all pan out, what the thing is, but it's the first step, and it's been ratified as a part of policy a couple of days back. So there is something called a common service framework coming in where different silos, siloed systems, different departments will eventually either share APIs or data. India is also working on something called the Essential Requirements and Mandatory Testing and Conformance. Anybody heard of this? Anybody know what this is? So this is a set of regulations, well, not regulations per se, but a set of minimum conformance. So that if you have an IoT device, it has to conform to these, these emissions or these radiations, or should not have this hazardous material. It has to be met with certain minimum tests. These are the testing agencies that will do this. This is the minimum certification that is expected out of that. What are the operating frequencies? I mean, there are a whole lot of things for different again, verticals. 7 areas have been covered initially. I don't know if they have covered more subsequently. Health devices, if you're working in the health domain, if you're working in the health IoT, there is an ER now, essential requirement saying that you have to conform to this. So also in IoT gateways, and I must say we are among the most progressive nations in that sense, where we have non-cellular, what's known as LPWAN, which LoRa and Sigfox and all that. They have made some kind of essential requirements saying if you're putting up a network, either a city or not a city, or in the private space, these are the minimum testing conditions. These are the minimum requirements that the device needs to have. So not just the network, but also in the gateways. if you have a smart energy meter, these are the essential requirements. If you have a tracking device, these are the requirements. If you have something with any of these, BLE, NFC, RFID devices, these are the minimum requirements that your device has to maintain, has to comply with. So I think this was announced again three, four months ago. This is the first draft. But there's lots more to be done in the IoT space, lots more to be done. As a startup in the IoT space, our challenges are huge. I mean, just from a design to a prototype to a manufacturing cycle, the number of iterations that we go through because either there's no component or the number of components are not, the volumes are not there, the lead times change, when you change one component, something else happens. So the challenges are huge. We need to be able to work better at that. I'm sure there are several vendors here who can help in solutions like this, in situations like this, but yes, we need to get that. Cost predictability, arrive at a cost before we actually go and plan the product. A lot of things change because of that. Operations, IoT devices fail considerably. Even one service operation will actually wipe out the cost or the profit of the entire year for that particular device. Regulations, still a lot of work to happen in regulations. Indigenous manufacturing, we're just trying to get good manufacturing here in Chennai and Bangalore. Happens, but simple soldering, if you change one component, simple soldering is a pain. It doesn't happen. And then the number of devices that get thrown out because are faulty are huge. I mean, if I do this overseas and bring it back into India, it's probably cheaper than actually trying to do what we are trying to do in India. Make in India, a lot more to be done. And the last but not the least, the hardware space. If you talk to a typical VC, if you're in the hardware space, even before you finish your first sentence saying you are trying to do IoT and hardware, they'll ask you to go out. I hope that changes, but this is typically what happens in the VC space. I know there's a session going on next door. I hope Som's listening to this, or we'll see this sometime in the future, and things change too. In the smart city space, as you can all imagine, lots to be done. The engagement model, how does a small company engage with the government? Not happening. You can't do it directly. You will have to work with an MSI. You will have to, eventually, I mean, even if you do some things directly, this number of initiatives launched by the government of India, Karnataka and all that, eventually it comes where, you have to work with some other parties. Your business model, and that's a big challenge. How do we get business out of a public solution? For a startup, very difficult. I mean, maybe solutions like what that are coming in, blockchain, etc., will help. You have to be able to charge consumers directly. Otherwise, yeah, there are problems. Auditing and documentation. Anytime there's a change in the document, you go through a whole life cycle of auditing, the redocumentation. Anyway, these are all challenges that will come in the government space. Safety net risk aversion, not there at all. If something changes, as a solution provider, you're done with. So moving quickly on from here, because I can see people rubbing their eyes. This is about open data. And the reason I'm bringing open data is, as we talk about, as Siddhartha will talk about platforms, to make data available, the government of India already has, and again, extremely progressive. They have identified something called the DAMA, which stands for the Data Analyzing and Monetizing Agency. So that's an agency that will monetize the data that comes out of smart cities. So two new infrastructure components the government of India has identified. One is obviously spectrum, as you all know, and how much a fight is going on between different companies for spectrum, how many governments it has brought down as well. The other now that they've identified as an infrastructure for a city is data. Data has been identified as, of course, they haven't really put on a budget to what they will make, but they have said that every smart city will eventually have an agency that monetizes the data that the city generates. Monetizes the data, enriches the data, analyzes the data, and makes meaning out of the data as well. I don't know whether it will be one company that does all this, there will be multiple companies, but the thought process is in place. And I guess this follows from several reports that have been doing the rounds lately that says that open data is an opportunity, is an annual opportunity of $3 to $5 trillion. Everybody's trying to monetize that. $3 to $5 trillion is huge, especially on an average. When you consider it's yearly, it's an annuity, and that's just across 7 sectors. And these 7 sectors are pretty much transport, public safety, energy, water, waste. And I guess it's because they're related. Anybody want to hazard a guess? What is India's, how much of non-revenue water do we have, and water that we don't pay for? How much of water gets lost, in other words? How much of water gets wasted? Anybody want to hazard a guess what India's, sorry? Oh, you're close. 62%. 62% of the water supplied by the government actually gets lost, wasted. It doesn't get built. It just goes. At the same time, in Delhi, do you want to guess how much of, what is the amount of energy required to pump water from different places? No? Oh, I'm just talking about in percentage now. 40%. It means 40% of the energy used by Delhi is to pump water from different places. One is, of course, apart from the distribution, the DISCOMs thing, it is to suck water from your, from the pipe into your sump or equivalent. Then it is to pump water from the sump to your overhead tank, and then from the overhead tank to give pressure again. So different systems consume 40% of the energy. I can hear Bezrin, and I'm sure everybody needs to talk to. So let me just quickly go fast. So this is what's happening in India. If this data is shared, if this data is made available, if this data is made public, I think different systems can be built more efficiently. And I think that's the initiative behind this open data and what government is trying to do with making data public. India also has something called the, I'll leave that when Siddhartha is talking. In Bangalore, we are trying this, crowdsourcing IoT and open data. And that is to do with pollution data, by the way, wherein it's a collaboration between different agencies and KUIDFC and the government of Karnataka, where they're trying to say, as citizens, you get involved in gathering data and making the data public. So as citizens, you'll be involved in collecting the data. There'll be a platform. We still haven't identified what the platform provider is, who the platform provider will be. But the platform essentially will be about statistical analysis, will be about enriching the data, will be about making more meaning out of the data, will be about data homogenization, will be about assigning weights intelligently. So they expect it to be some kind of a machine learning platform which says that this data coming from this person has probably got more weight than others. The system is supposed to give out kits to general public saying that these are the kits you can put together to gather pollution data. And as I'm sure Vaidya will tell you, most of these kits may not, these low-cost kits may not gather data that can actually be used. So it is all about figuring out how data can be used and whether it will actually be of value. So that's the experiment that's happening in this crowdsourcing initiative. And again, Bangalore is one of the first. But I think I'll end here because what we can do with IoT is pretty much move towards becoming more sentient economies. We'll talk about this as we go further, but this is what I wanted to talk about and give you all an idea of what smart cities are, not just in India, but also in China per se. And I wanted to talk about more parts of the world, but obviously time doesn't permit. And then bring it all back to Bangalore, where we're doing something pioneering with IoT, IoT, the government, and of course blockchain. There's supposed to be a blockchain built into all this, where data authenticity and data integrity will also be maintained. Arvind, I guess, can talk about it more. We'll leave it to him. In fact, we can probably talk about it more during question and answers. I'll end here. Thank you.